Right, this meeting will now come to order, and I will read the EPSB mission statement. The Education Professional Standards Board, in full collaboration and cooperation with its education partners, promotes high levels of student achievement by establishing and enforcing rigorous professional standards for preparation, certification, and responsible and ethical behavior of all professional educators in Kentucky. Serving as board secretary is Leah Sharp. Ms. Sharp, please call the roll.
Linda Ellis, present. Susan Weaver, present. Diane Berry, present. Elijah Edwards,
Present.
CJ Fryer,
Present.
Patty Gunn,
Present.
Priscilla Keller, present. Amy Linda, present. Jacqueline Mayfield,
Present.
Brandon Murphy, Meredith Pittman, present. Lisa Ruzinski, present. Amber Snow, present. Wade Stanfield,
Present.
Vice Chair Freeman, Chair Measurement.
Present. All right, thank you. And thank you for everybody that's sort of stayed with us this morning. I know we've had some technical difficulties, so thanks for hanging in there with us. And this time, has anyone signed up for open speak? All right. Well, this morning, Byron Darnell joins us on behalf of Commissioner Glass. Welcome, Dr. Darnell. And you can begin with any of those reports you'd like to start with.
Make sure any of the reports. Well, Dr. Glass, I just double checked with them to see if there's anything specific that he wanted me to relay. I believe he's attending communication for CCSSO event. He just said that given all the legislative update that would be primary portion of what he would want to relay to. So he didn't have anything other than that to put forth to you all. So given the lineup of individuals that we have, we will now allow Ms. Susan Griever to give the report from the cabinet. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I just wanted to give a brief update on the Everybody Counts program out of ELC. And they are now active in Jefferson, Shelby, Franklin, Scott, and Fayette County. They have brought on some new business partners in Franklin County, and they're picking up 10 plus now staff, trying to expand and bring in new school districts and new partners to the program. Also on April 24th, I think at 3 p.m., the ECTC Blue Oval SK Training Center will have a groundbreaking and outside of down in Glendale. So that is pretty exciting. That's moving forward.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the information. That is exciting. And now I will move along to Dr. Amanda Ellis to give a report on the ebook.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of updates. So recently our Kentucky Advising Academy, which focuses on building capacity of staff and those who work with students in high schools, it's for college and career advising. We have a toolkit that just came out. It's online and free, and we are constantly adding to that. So it's a living document to provide just-in-time resources for folks to work with students and have access to all of the resources here in Kentucky. It's not novel. We just have a lot of things that people just don't know about because there's so much. And so I'm super excited about that. I'd be happy to share the link. We also we're able to award one last time, at least with the COVID relief funds that we were able to secure from KDE, our Summer Bridge Program Awards. We had $1.2 million left over from funds that were not expended. And so from the previous Summer Bridge programs, and we're able to grant 23 campuses $50,000 grants for sustainability grants for Summer Bridge. And our numbers continue to grow, and our outcomes continue to be strengthened. Students stay longer. They feel a sense of belonging when they come to the campuses, and we're just really encouraged with those outcomes. We did have an external evaluation, just initial impact, and so we're really encouraged and hope to see that continue, and love to seek funds to continue that support as well to our campuses, as public and private campuses. So great opportunity. The other thing just to bring to your attention really quickly is we do, and I mentioned this before, but we do have a dual credit professional development series that's going on. There are webinars that began in February. We've had excellent participation. You can listen to those afterwards because I know you're really busy, but they are live. And what we do is we don't share our expertise. We find the expertise in the state to talk about partnerships with our campuses and our high schools and districts on what they do to increase access to dual credit and quality of that dual credit alignment, that they are well advised and have opportunities. And just to add on to that, a couple weeks ago, it feels like forever since there was spring break in between, is that we did have approval to a couple of updates to our dual credit policy at CPE. One of those is reporting for the campuses so we have a better idea of who is participating. But the purpose of that is because we have set, we're the first state to do this, is set an attainment goal. So we have excellent participation dual credit, but we don't have an incredibly diverse student body participation in our dual credit programs. So we're really looking at the different populations of students, even gender, to really try to increase awareness and encourage students to take advantage of the opportunity. Financial barrier is not an issue there when we have the dual credit scholarship, and lots of opportunities through career and technical education and even your traditional general education courses. So part of ways to improve is to know where you stand. And so we're setting goals to move forward. In the last 5 years, we have had an over 75% increase in dual credit, but we know we have work to do on quality and accessibility. That is not the same. And so we're really working to improve that and work with our secondary schools to provide that support and our institutions that provide the courses. So lots of great work. There's lots of things going on, but I will stop there. So thank you, Dr.
Dr. Ellis. I see Mr. Perry of the teams up there. So if he's feeling okay, got a little bit of illness that he's battling here. So I appreciate him moving in on teams. But Mr. Brian Perry will now give a legislative update.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry I can't be there in person. After dodging it for 3 years, I finally tested positive for COVID over the weekend. So in quarantine here. So we'll go through the slides, and then if you all have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. So despite the commentary before the session started that this was going to be the year they got back to the original intent of the short session, we saw a lot of bills filed and a lot of bills passed related to education. So I've put them all on the slides just for reference purposes, but we don't have to talk about all of them. So let me see if I can. There we go. So in terms of the process going forward, so we have a bit of a break now that the session is over, barring the governor calling them into special session, which isn't really on the radar at this point. They won't be back in session until January. The interim period will start in about a month, and so that's when the interim joint committees will meet. So for example, House and Senate education committees come together and meet about monthly. So it'll be a good chance for them to learn about topics that may come up again next session. So we may have some, you'll have some presentations over the interim that we'll talk about here in a little bit. In terms of legislation that just passed, any bill or section of a bill that had an emergency clause becomes effective immediately upon enrollment. So those bills are already in effect. Those without an emergency clause go into effect 90 days after sine die. And so the AG always issues an opinion setting that official date. And so this year it's June 29th. So, all right, so let's get into the bills. So and I'm still not 100% sure what all applies to you all. So we'll just kind of talk about some of the big ones. Remember that the bills that are under 10 are generally considered the priority bills for that chamber for the session. Sorry, notifications popping up here. So Senate Bill 3 relates to educator liability insurance for certified employees. It does not cover classified employees. So this will be going through KDE now. SB 5 was one that you probably heard quite a bit about. It was referred to as the book banning bill in the media and social media. It's not really that far, and it actually is something that a lot of districts, I think, already had in place, but it does allow parental challenges to materials, programs, and events that may be harmful to minors. So we're still working on what that policy will look like. SB 5 does direct the department to issue a model policy, And so we have already started talking to KSBA about what that policy will look like so that we're all on the same page as we put that out for the districts. SB 7 relates to wage deduction of dues and fees that are related to a labor organization for political activities. So a lot of questions about this one. I think that this is one that might have some unintended consequences that we're still kind of working through. SB 9 was an anti-hazing bill, more aligned with post-secondary than us, but still an important bill that I wanted to point out. SB 25 relates to post-secondary readiness indicators. Our Office of Career and Technical Education has been working on this one as it'll really impact some of the work that they're doing. SB 49 is one we'll talk about a little bit later on, so we'll skip it for now. SB 70 is a really good example of what the short session was originally intended for. It literally just resets the date of a pilot program that was set to start before COVID hit and got disrupted by COVID. And so it's just resetting the dates for it. So it's a good example of what these short sessions were intended for originally. SB 93 was one that they had to do because of some old language from the late 1890s, so that Lewis County could get rid of some property. SB 156 is one we're real excited about. Our chief academic officer was real involved in this one. It will allow the department to put out an RFP for a new statewide reading research center. So that will happen pretty quickly, but we're real excited to see that one go into effect and kind of see where that goes next. SB 169 is related to P3s, public-private partnerships. This is, I think, something that's fairly new for local school districts coming from the post-secondary side. These were commonplace, so I was a little surprised that it's kind of a new thing for school districts, but it just allows boards to enter into their, or school districts to enter into those P3s. SB 107, I'm sure you all heard a lot about during the session. This will be a pretty seismic shift for the department in terms of how the commissioner is hired. It will require initial Senate confirmation of the commissioner upon hire, and then every 4 years thereafter, assuming that they get a new contract. So there's no limit on the number of contracts, but it will require Senate confirmation each time a contract is done. SB 150, I'll just touch on very quickly. Obviously, this is probably the most controversial thing that got done during the session. A lot of backstory here. SB 150 started out as the parental rights bill. We thought it would be the one that got across the finish line. It got amended very late in the session to also include most of what was in House Bill 470 that relates to transgender care for minors. And then also a little bit of what was in HB 30, I believe, which was a facility usage bill. And so all of that kind of got rolled into one bill that got across the finish line very late in the session, and then got a veto override on the last 2 days. SB 247 is related to transient public school students. It allows students that move within the district to stay at the same school, but does give the superintendent a little bit of leeway in terms of whether or not the transportation will be reasonable or not. Senate Joint Resolution 98, I just wanted to mention because, again, this could be it could be a really big change to the education landscape in Kentucky, depending on what happens with it. But it directs CPE to do a study of essentially the post-secondary landscape right now. And it goes back to House Bill 1 of 1997's extraordinary session that created CPE as well as KCTCS. So kind of, I guess, depending on where this goes, it could be a big shift. The one thing that I think is most important for the department is that it asks CPE to sort of look at this idea of taking gen ed courses from KCTCS, giving those essentially back to the regional universities, which I think then makes KCTCS back to the technical college system, which is half of what created it in the first place. So could be a big shift there. The other thing about this that I've gotten a few questions about, and I heard Dr. Ellis mention this earlier, was dual credit. And I'm unclear as to what the impact for dual credit could be. But I'm sure that will be part of what they talk about in their report. So House Bills 3 and 5 were important bills, but I don't think they really relate to EPSB much. House Bill 5, the bourbon barrel tax, may significantly impact school districts in terms of revenue long term, but we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. And House Bill 3 really only has a truancy component that relates to the districts. House Bill 32 is one that I just wanted to quickly mention because I think it's kind of an interesting one as it relates to equity and diversity. So it allows for the hiring of classified personnel without a high school diploma or equivalency, as long as the district provides an opportunity to get one at no cost to the employee. And I think that this is interesting in a way because there was some conversation in committees about, someone that for whatever reason didn't get that high school diploma or equivalency, but has, say, a CDL and could fill a critical need area. So hopefully it'll allow the districts to fill those, but also it seems like it does, get to this idea of not penalizing people for not having that diploma or equivalent, but maybe have credentials that could be of use for the department. 244 is related to the National Guard Youth Challenge Program, but I don't think it has much to do with EPSB. House Bill 241 is another good example of a real short session bill. It just adds a little bit of mental health language to an existing policy. House Bill 319 we'll talk about here in a few minutes. It's the omnibus that was related to recruitment and retention. House Bill 331 is related to automatic defibrillators in schools. 393 was another surplus property bill. House Bill 538 is one that I think will be of importance for the teacher preparation programs as it relates to kind of preparing new teachers because it does relate to student discipline. It got a lot of tweaks along the way as folks were trying to find kind of the right balance of giving schools more tools to manage student discipline issues, but also not going too far. Also, there was quite a bit of discussion about how this might impact minority students more than other student populations. So, a lot of balancing was trying to be done there to find that mix that would work to help the districts, but also not go too far. 506 is just allowing for classified retirees to return after 1 month. I think it was previously 3 months. House Bill 547 is another one that the preparation programs may be interested in because it's related to First Amendment rights as it relates to private religious expression. So this was related to a case out of Washington State where a football coach prayed either before or after a football game. So it's related to that. But again, I think that while it may have been sort of targeted in one direction, I think it also will cover a lot of teachers that may have a wide range of religious beliefs. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what the impact of that is. And 553 got done really late in the session and provide some additional money for growth districts. So that was something that we were really excited to see get done there at the end. All right, so that's the really quick version of what happened over the last 3 or 4 months in terms of new legislation. So 319 was the teacher omnibus bill that was really targeted toward recruitment and retention. It did get pared down quite a bit, but this is an important first step. I think that the sponsor, Chair Tipton, has every intention of coming back next session and asking for some appropriations, both for things that are in here now, but also for some things that got taken out along the way. And that was really because this wasn't a budget session. And so those appropriation parts just kind of complicated things this session. So hopefully we'll see kind of part 2 of this in the next session and see some of this get funded in the budget. It's a big bill, even though it got kind of whittled down quite a bit. So it has 10 sections, and I'll quickly run through those, and then if there are questions, we can talk about it. So the first part is the Teacher Mobility Compact. So this just adopts the language of the compact, and so that's pretty exciting. It'll allow for teachers in the compact states to come to Kentucky and teach. Military Affairs was very interested in this getting done because of their 2 big bases here in the state. So they've got a lot of spouses coming in. So it could really help on that front. I don't know when this kicks in. I'll leave that to Dr. Darnell and his team. I know that there's some magic number of states that have to adopt the compact language. So I think we're getting close with us adopting it. So hopefully that will get in the next maybe year or so. Section 2 mandates that KDE develop an exit survey. So it's a pretty broad language, and I think it directs us to provide an exit interview for all folks that are leaving the district. I think that really, though, that they're targeting those early career teachers that are leaving the classroom. So we may want to kind of get some cleanup language around that, because I'm not sure that we really want to interview retirees, for example. But we've already started talking a little bit about this. I think that we're going to want to have a standardized exit interview that we provide to the districts so that we can, look at things across the state. If every district is doing their own survey, it's not going to be nearly as useful. But I know that our OELE team is already talking about this, and I think that over the next month or so, we'll have more. But I think it'll be interesting to kind of see what the results of these surveys are. So section 3 relates to the KEPS system. It really is wanting us as a department to kind of clean up KEPS and get better data on teacher openings across the state. So this was a sort of a point of contention over the past year, was how many teacher vacancies are there in the state at any given moment. And so this section is really getting to that question. Again, there's not funding here for this right now, but I'm hoping that we will see some next session that can help the department implement what they're wanting us to do. So section 4 relates to the teacher scholarship program. So there's a teacher scholarship out there that's funded at $1 million a year right now. So this makes some statutory changes to that language. And again, I think next session we may see an increase or an ask to increase that $1 million funding to some other number. We'll see. So section 5, ask EPSB to establish procedures to issue alternative route candidates and eligible for a hire letter. And I think this was trying to address a bit of a chicken and egg situation where you had candidates that were looking for jobs and applying for jobs, but weren't far enough along in the process to get hired. And so this eligible for hire letter should address that issue and help districts fill some of those positions. Section 6, again, just gets to this idea of posting vacancies so that we have a better idea of just how many openings there are in the state. Section 7 directs OELE to undertake a review of the alternative pathway options. So I think we have 9 options right now, some of which are basically not used at all. And so I think they're finally recognizing that we have a lot of options out there right now, and then it's time to go through and potentially clean up some of those and maybe take some of those off the books that aren't being used, that sort of thing. So that's all in section 7. And you'll notice that they're asking for a report by October 1 on that one. Let's see. Section 8 creates a new 1-year interim certificate, renewable up for 2 years for someone with a bachelor's degree and at least 4 years of work experience in the area in which they're going to teach. And then sections 9 and 10 just change the way that sick and personal leave is taken. I guess they had to submit notarized forms in the past, and this just lets them submit non-notarized forms. So those are the 10 sections that made it through in 319. Again, it's probably not as much as a lot of folks wanted to see get done around recruitment and retention of teachers, but I think it is an important first step. And I do think that we will see this this issue continue to get addressed throughout the interim and then into next session. So that's 319, and I have one last bill to talk about. I know this is a lot, and I apologize. It's always overwhelming to go through these reviews at the end of the session. I spend months following these things, so it's kind of secondhand, but I know for a lot of folks, it's a lot to take in at once. So Senate Bill 49 makes some changes to some of the alternative programs that I just mentioned are going to get reviewed, but it changes the time frames for option 6 and option 7. You can, I think, see them on the screen there, but it just extends both of them by 2 years. But I'll let OELE staff talk a little bit more about those with you all, so you get better information. Let's see. All right, and so as I said earlier, we'll roll right into the interim session here in about a month. You all do have a few reports that are going to be due. That report on alternative pathways is due on October 1st, and you have another one due on October 1st regarding the KEP system and kind of what the job data looks like, the job posting data looks like there. I also think that you all will be asked to present on your work around the -1 SEM and PPAP pilot, as well as anything you all are working on regarding multiple measures. So I think you'll get an invitation for that probably in, I don't know, October, November. I think it'll be late in the interim, so to give you all as much time as possible to gather more data. So, and that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. Good, sir.
All right.
Very appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us in COVID state, and certainly wish you fast healing and your family as well for having to manage quarantine and all that. But thanks for joining us.
Oh, sure. No problem.
So first, I just want to wish everyone a happy Easter. Second, as always, I recognize the many hands that work in the background to make this meeting run smoothly and effectively. And then third, I recognize each of you and your commitment to this work. I do want to begin by just reminding us we are here out of passion for the profession. Always work to keep in mind that, or we should know that our experiences are varied, which is important considering the difficult tasks this world faces. With that, I just remind myself, as much as anyone else, to assume good intention in others' words, with the recognition that we are all entitled to a voice in this process. As Mr. Perry mentioned, we are now on the other side of the 2023 legislative session. The coming months, EPSB has a lot to unpack. Just a few notes of interest to add on to the Senate Bill 49, which we'll get into a little bit more detail this morning, so don't want to labor that. But it also added the renewal aspect of those that already have an emergency certification to teach. So it does renew, it does allow for a renewal again, which districts have definitely asked repetitively about this and have mentioned it as a prominent concern. So it's nice to see that within Senate Bill 49. As you mentioned, Senate Bill 156 creates an RFP for a new statewide reading research center. Dr. Diebel, Mr. Davis, and myself have been working with the assembled group regarding the use of high quality instructional materials within educator preparation programs. Much dialogue and partnership remains as we continue to advance the careers of future educators, but this is certainly an intensive bit of work that is part of Senate Bill 9 session, and then also another opportunity with Senate Bill 156 and the new RFP that will be coming shortly. Mr. Perry went through a lot of House Bill 319. Primarily, of course, there's a focus on improving the functionality and monitoring of the KEP system, the posting system. It has been in place for some time. So there are sort of questions about, costs come with modernizing things. So there's a few things to work through since there's not an appropriation, but certainly we're going to do our very best to see how much we can improve the level of KEPs given what we currently have. Then the adoption of the Interstate Mobility Compact was mentioned. We heard from Mr. Jimmy Adams last time, who gave you a great deal of information as the expert in that area. There will need to be 10 states that adopt legislative language to enact. So for one, I'm not aware of any others at this time, but we'll wait and see. And hopefully that will move more swiftly than most things move within the legislative process. Certainly, as Ms. Ray mentioned, there's a lot to consider in terms of the exit interviews, employees leaving a district and why they're leaving a district. And we'll need a coordinated effort with the department in order to make sure we're providing something useful and not duplicative across the state as well. And then, of course, just the providing eligible candidates with an eligible for hire letter, of course, getting at largely perhaps questions around option 6 or option 7, where their programs are triggered as a result of them getting hired first, and then they go in. So there's just been a lot of conversation around what is the best way to handle that. So this is a step to try to, I guess, qualify individuals a little bit more. So also I want to point out, please note the wonderful article in Friday's Kentucky Teacher highlighting Go Teach Kentucky Ambassador Melinda Richardson and her efforts to support the Grow Your Own in Powell County through the Student Teacher Education Partnership Initiative. So this is part of the STEP grant that was awarded to districts. And this is just an example of districts that are doing a good job of running with us and utilizing their Go Teach KY ambassadors as a part of this effort. So just really a wonderful article. If you did not happen to catch it, love to highlight that for you. Chair Mitchell, Vice Chair Weedman, Ms. Trueblood, Mr. Allen, and I continue to participate in conversations with the KBE Chair and Vice Chair in an effort to support the vision and mission of both boards. Additionally, during the KBE meeting that begins tomorrow and ends on Tuesday, I will present annual budget requests on behalf of OELE for KTIP, Educators Rising, Go Teach KY, and Praxis Reimbursement. So these are requests, but we're going to put them in there. So those would be the 4 requests that I will present to the board, and these are certainly highly integral aspects of OELE and EPSB as well. I'm also excited to mention that a new educator dashboard is in the works. The goal is to produce a more useful tool that highlights the needs of the profession within every district across Kentucky. There's a lot of data that has been gathered. A lot of it is from disparate streams and multiple databases. And so through help with other divisions here within KDE, I guess the ultimate goal is to have a useful tracking mechanism for some of the questions that have arisen around what does the teacher pipeline actually look like. And it is very complicated, and all states have been immersed in trying to find better ways to report this data. But I am excited, cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to put this data in a usable fashion. So I'll keep you updated as that goes along, and hopefully in the not so distant future, be able to show you a mock-up of what that might look like. So with that, I just want to say I appreciate your time and appreciate you all taking the opportunity to serve this board and be here today. Chair Mitchell, I appreciate the time to give you a little update.
Yeah, thank you so much for presenting. Wanted to remind members that this year, the June meeting falls on Juneteenth. Therefore, we're working on finding a new meeting date. The current proposed date is Friday, June 16th. So please let staff know as soon as possible if you're able to attend that meeting on June 16th. And it'll probably be a virtual meeting at that time. All right, moving on to consent items. Items A through Q are listed on the agenda as consent items. I will give the members a moment to review that list. Anyone wish to remove any of the items from the consent agenda for further discussion? Having received no requests to remove items from the consent agenda, can I have a motion to approve consent items A through Q?
I make the motion to approve consent items A through Q.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve consent items A through Q. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Moving to the information item over Kentucky Teacher Internship Program. This is presented to the board for review and discussion only. Welcome.
Good morning.
Board.
So I was told to do a presentation on KTIP, just to kind of give you an overview of what KTIP is, statutory and regulatory requirements. So there's a PowerPoint behind you if you want to look at it as well. But we'll go through that.
Ruby shared these afterwards.
You can speak to that.
Yes, we can set it up. So what is KTIP? What was KTIP? Whichever one you want to use. So it was created in 1985. Todd, if you'll move to the next slide. If it'll move. So KTIP was created in 1985. It was unfunded in 2018. So we have been KTIP since 2018. It was a statewide internship program, and it was required for all new teachers and out-of-state teachers with less than 2 years of teaching experience. And they were seeking initial certification in Kentucky. It is a full year, which means 140 instructional days of classroom teaching. They have supervision, assistance, and assessment through a beginning teacher committee. So KTIP was designed to assist new teachers to be successful in the classroom, and also to strengthen their effective teaching skills for student learning. So it's just pretty much a support system for new teachers. So beginning teacher committee consisted technically of 3 members, plus you have your intern who, that was the focal point. So it was the principal of the school where the intern was employed, a resource teacher who was pretty much their mentor, and then a teacher educator who was from a college or university that district fell under. So depending on which district it was as to which EPP would assign the teacher educator. So statutory requirements, there are several. So again, it was all new teachers and out-of-state teachers with less than 2 years of teaching experience. The teacher had to be a full-time employee or have an annual contract and serve on at least a half-time basis. And we considered a half-time basis at least 15 hours per week. They would have supervision assistance, and then they would have an assessment during the 1-year internship. The internship would be served in a public school or what we considered accredited non-public school. So it could have been a private school as long as they met the requirements to be an accredited school. And then they did successful completion was determined by a majority vote of the beginning teacher committee, and that was the principal, resource teacher, and teacher educator. So the beginning teacher committee was the 3 persons, and they determined the outcome of the internship. They were trained. There was a KTIP training that was provided by the EPP. The committee would meet with the beginning teacher a minimum of at least 3 times. They had 3 KTIP, what we call KTIP committee meetings. And then they also had to observe the intern a minimum of 3 times during that internship year. So then the resource teacher had the requirement of spending 70 hours with the intern. So they did 20 in class and 50 out of class. And those out of class could be, discussing lesson plans, or if they saw a problem during their observation or the committee saw a problem, they could sit down, discuss that, and go over that. In class hours, they could be observing another teacher. Resource teacher could be in there observing the intern. So there were several different ways that they could meet these requirements. This resource teacher had to have at least 4 years of successful teaching experience, or by achieving tenure, be able to show evidence for the professional development, by showing 2,000 hours of continuing professional activities. Very rarely did we do that one. We usually just look for the 4 years of successful teaching experience. And then again, EPSB in cooperation with the college or university provided a KTIP training for all committee members. The intern did not have to attend that. They were welcome to attend the training if they wanted to, but they were not required, but all 3 committee members were required to attend that training. So that was the statutory requirements in a nutshell. So we'll go through the regulatory requirements. So the internship could be done in 2 ways. So they could be employed for 140 instructional days for what we call a school year. Or if they were hired late, let's say they were hired in January, if they could complete 70 instructional days, then they were able to start their internship, but then they would have to finish the rest of the 70 days in a consecutive school year. So to where they would get their 140 days. So they had to have at least 140 for the year, or at least 70 for a semester, and then 70 for the next consecutive school year. So the beginning teacher committee, again, has to meet with the intern for 3 official observations, and we say at least 1 hour in duration or 1 class period. Or they could make 2 1-hour or 1 class period observations, followed by an observation of the teacher intern's 1 hour or 1 class period videotaped lesson. So they could do a videotaped lesson. So that was in play long before COVID ever came about. They could do a videotape. So, so they could do conduct a lesson plan review prior to each of the 3 observations. So the intern had to have their lesson plan, had to send that to the committee members, and they would review that, and then they would do an observation. They would report progress and concerns to the committee at the scheduled committee meetings, and then the intern was also involved in those committee meetings, so nothing was a surprise for the intern. So under extraordinary circumstances, an intern could put their internship on what we consider hold, and then they could pick up where they left off once they came back, and that was for medical reasons, temporary disability, or military deployment. We had quite a few of those where they could put their internship on hold. So if an intern is deemed unsuccessful by the beginning teacher committee, the intern has the right to appeal that decision. The appeals committee will review the written appeal by the intern, all the documentation submitted by the intern, the committee reports, any additional documentation that was shown and done during the internship period, the final reports, the resource teacher timesheet, and any responses from the members of the beginning teacher committee. The appeals committee included a teacher, a principal, a teacher educator, and then at the time, the executive director of EPSB or his or her designee, which usually was Kathy or someone in that realm. So, and it was not someone who served on that intern's committee. It had to be someone other than the committee, the internship committee. So the appeals committee will make a recommendation to the EPSB, and they had 60 calendar days following the receipt of the appeal. EPSB issues a final decision in each appeal reviewed by the appeals committee. And when making that decision, the EPSB can only consider the appeals committee recommendation and the records reviewed by the appeals committee. So nothing new could have been brought that the appeals committee had not seen. A teacher intern who did not successfully complete the internship and exhausted 2 years of their internship cannot teach in Kentucky ever. So they have 2 shots at KTIP. They weren't successful in those 2 shots, then they cannot teach in Kentucky. That was pretty much KTIP in a short, condensed version. Does anyone have any questions?
Any idea how many did not pass KTIP and had to go through the appeals process?
On an average year, you probably had maybe 5 that would appeal. It wasn't a big number, but we did have that. And I think in the history of KTIP, we had maybe 2, 3 maybe at most who exhausted their 2 years of.
Are any districts still using it, even though it's not funded through the state?
There are some districts who may not be full version of KTIP, but they are doing some form of a mentoring program. I know some of them still use a lot of our documents. They're still out there that they can use. Some districts aren't doing anything because they don't have the resources to do an internship or a mentoring program, but there are a lot of districts, some districts that are actually doing.
One of the differences with those programs that are district level, those are not going to be tied to certification, whereas KTIP was tied to certification and had that uniformity across the board. What is the budget impact for a single person to go through KTIP? What is the monetary cost of average?
An average, it was about, if you talk, so we're talking about resource teacher pay, so we paid the resource teacher, we paid the teacher educator and the university for like training and all of that. It would be probably guesstimating.
It was about 1,200 intern, I believe.
Well, 1,200 was just for the resource teacher. So you stack on another 400, so it was about 1,800 to 2,000.
You're welcome. I think Dr. Darnell mentioned in his report that he will be presenting a budgetary request to the Kentucky Board of Education this week at their meetings in hopes to see some funding come back to this project. But that was part of the intent in this presentation from Ms. Salzman this morning is the board has had a lot of interest and discussion about KTIP and what has gone on in its absence because it was unfunded at the end of the 2017-2018 school. And so we wanted to give you just an update. I know most people around this table have been involved in KTIP in some manner, either going through it, being a resource teacher, being an administrator, but just an overview of what the statutory and regulatory requirements were so we could hear from you what your vision for this is going forward. If this is the program that you would like to continue to advocate for its return in the state.
I think there were many benefits to KTIP. And I think a lot of issues that we're seeing now could have been avoided if KTIP were still in place the past 5 years.
Excuse me, I agree with that. I feel like a lot of our new teachers, like our district has a mentor, programs. They're not completely like sewn to the wolves. But it still lacks some of the things that KTIP required that I think a lot of the new teachers would be better supported and better prepared, and maybe less likely to went through KTIP myself and was a mentor teacher. I was a big fan on both sides.
They said exactly what I was going to say. I concur.
So I think I came through with KTIP a little later in the program, so my perspective is a little bit different. And from what I understand of what I did, it was a much more pared down version of KTIP. So did it change over the duration from binders upon binders of stuff to, can we speak to that progression of that a little bit?
So yes, but when KTIP first came out in 1985, it was the 3 big stack, ridiculous amount of papers. And then I'm trying to think of what year it was, 2011. Don't hold me to the date. But we did go through and change it. It was what we called the teacher performance assessment. And it brought it down paperwork down drastically. And then not too long before K-TIP went away, we adopted the Kentucky Framework for Teaching. And that was pretty much the guidance for K-TIP. And so it even brought down the amount of work. It was still integral part, and I think it was still very important, but it wasn't what I call all these hoops that they have to jump through and just paperwork to be doing paperwork. So yes, K-TIP has changed drastically since its inception.
To say, I think that's part of my concern is what I went through in 16, 17 was very different than some of the like stories that I have heard that I would have a lot of concerns about. I think the mentorship is extremely important and we need that in place.
And I think even if K-TIP is brought back and we look at it, it would be a different form of K-TIP. It would, we want to get rid of it's just a hoop to jump through or paperwork, just paperwork. Let's look at something and make it important for the intern to be successful. So we would have a committee of people that would look through and say, okay, what K-TIP, what was important, what can we still use, but what is something different that we would look at as well.
I mean, as long as it continues to be, I think moving toward the Kentucky teaching framework, that process, I think that's very beneficial to the process, along with the mentoring piece. I mean, those two components together, I mean, it's integral, and I think that is K-TIP.
I would have two, I think, districts that are kind of doing their makeshift, program right now for their new teachers. They're basically taking voluntold mentors. So what I do like about K-TIP too is that we're valuing time of our experienced better teachers who have a lot to offer these new teachers and making sure they're compensated appropriately. So I think that's valuable.
I also think something else that was a benefit, Sharon, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, was, and to your point, CJ, is the benefit of earning college credit, having college credit. That's a huge expenditure. So it may not come out in the form of a check, but if you were pursuing advanced degrees or to continue to credential, I think that's a big deal. I think that, Wade, what you said too is, I was a principal during all the phases, and I came here and was in the rest of the phases, but is that really the mentoring piece? And I think, and for your point too, is it's what is it that made it special? And what is it that took a lot of time that wasn't as meaningful? Because I think some of the things that, Sharon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when we were in transition during it, is it went from writing the most beautiful lesson plan that wasn't realistic in that setting, when they were working so much harder writing the pretty lesson plan instead of really thinking about the needs of their students. And it kind of shifted more into data of like, what do you know about your students? What do you know about their performance, and how are you targeting your instruction, which was changed the discussion, right? Instead of jumping through the hoops for 3 people, you're really focusing more on your students and what your students need, instead of what the 3 adults are looking for. And that kind of changed the conversation, which was much more powerful. And so I do think there were, to your point, the evolution of it. Basically, there were definite strengths that I think would really need to be dug into. And what is it that was meaningful for the intern? What was meaningful for the teacher who invested their time and energy into mentoring, and even the principal and the higher ed rep was it was nice to have those 3 sitting around going, we're here for you. I think that triage was really, and if it was presented in the right way, I think was a huge piece of making somebody feel like they're investing in me and they know that I'm going to mess up, but I'm going to navigate this instead of just like, here's your key, And so I definitely think some digging into what parts were the most meaningful and what to really invest in that's going to make people really stick with it.
I would also like to see in that budget request some money for districts to pay for subs to cover the classes for those mentor teachers, because if you're in a building where you're having to constantly cover classes and you're planning, or if you're in a building that doesn't have a planning, then it's difficult to take that experienced teacher out of the classroom and provide that. But I think you definitely need to have observations. The videotaped observation, I would get rid of that and put in the have them be present. you can't pick up the full dynamic, I don't think, on the video. And I think that it becomes more performance for the K-tip educator as opposed to that interactive feedback in the classroom, the mentor and the team to be able to provide that.
And whatever the process is that we put behind it, let's keep in mind that we don't want to become a barrier either for districts, especially we're already in a critical shortage anyway, and then we put more things. We definitely don't want to do that. But I mean, I think like you said, I mean, researching it and putting the best foot forward, so to speak, for lack of better words, will help definitely with that process, and especially with, like the mayor said, with retention, because it does create a sense of belonging, to that particular district school, so to speak. For that, I feel old, and so in that.
So when K-tip was fully funded, we did pay for subs. And then when K-tip wasn't fully funded and we were having to deny because of budget, that was one of the things, because we thought it was really important to pay the resource teachers and the teacher educators and supply the training, that substitute teacher was one of the things that got taken away. And videotaping the classroom, that's an option. And it usually happens in the third cycle. And if it's a struggling intern, they won't do a videotape. They'll actually go in the classroom.
I think that the concerns that I'm hearing about the video is that not the immediate feedback and someone in there, whereas now where we do have Google Classrooms and Teams, you may be able to kind of offset that need for somebody to travel either, but they still could be reviewing it in real time. So those are things that it does sound like there's a consensus among the board that this is a program that you see value in and would like it to come back. But also that acknowledgement that this is a program that hasn't been operational since 2018, and things have changed a little bit since then. So maybe the staff can, in moving forward with these proposals, look at that and review it with stakeholders and bring something back to you at a future meeting about here are some of the things that we've heard from stakeholder review as well that would like to review as you go forward.
Is there, like what Eli was mentioning, is there a significant increase in teacher educated cases prior to versus when it went away, as far as cases that we've seen?
Really, we would just have anecdotal information on there. But I do feel that this board, in reviewing those cases, a lot of times there have been some acknowledgement that if this person had had a little more help this year, or if they had a little additional mentoring during their beginning, that maybe we wouldn't be seeing them. Maybe they would have had somebody to know to talk to them.
Even though anecdotal, I think that would be, really something.
And I would prioritize those people entering education through alternative routes. Those may be the focal point for K-tip as opposed to those traditionally trained educators who've gone through and had that. We're starting to create some type of priority list, those alternate route people.
I feel that, I agree with everything that everyone's saying, and make sure that we have something in there for behavior management. Because that's a big thing that, kind of makes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that from the board. I've stayed quiet just because I didn't want to, put my thoughts on anyone. But I've been on the board since 2018, right when it was unfunded. And I feel like I've tried to bring this up every meeting since 2018 that we need to fund K-tip. And I think looking at the program, the pros, the cons, I think communicating what this might be different than the phases throughout, because when you talk to people in the profession who did K-tip in the 90s compared to the early 2000s to late 20 teens, you see a a whole different array of stories. And so some people have in their mind, oh, portfolios, and you just want to really, us as a board, if this is a direction that we go, communicate what this new program looks like. But everything I've sort of written down in my notes, I think has been hit. The idea of mentors and helping with retention within the profession, and new teachers in our alternative programs, having some kind of training in that, reflection on teaching. And then, we do have some of this happening in the quasi program in some of our districts, but typically those are our urban districts. And I'm just fearful that our rural populations are not getting the same access to trainings and preparedness as maybe some of our other districts. So I'm go ahead. No, go for it.
Maybe we rebrand the whole thing and we don't call it KTIP.
Yeah.
I mean, if KTIP has got that stigma from the past, if during the course of this reevaluation, there is even a new name and focus, it could signify maybe a little bit of shift. And even though people will be like, it's the old KTIP, but maybe we call it something different.
Yes, I'm okay with whatever we call it. I just think it needs to happen. And I think, so I'm glad that is something that our board is working on. And I'm hopeful that KBE will put that as a priority for their budget request in this new biennium. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next couple of days with their board meetings. Any other questions or discussions on this issue? All right. Thank you so much. All right. So we find where we are. Kathy's leaving, so that means we are in action items. These items are presented to the board for action and will require a motion and a vote. Action item A is presented by Ms. Trueblood.
Morning. You want to update the members. There is an intensity coming in Louisville right now. I know we've got a lot of members on our board that are from the Jefferson area. There has been a shooting in town. I don't have a lot of details on it, but they are reporting multiple sightings. We just can take a moment to think about all those involved. As we proceed. If anybody needs to take some time away, you need to step out, you need to check on family members, please still bring it to that. Jeff, when you get back, just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. But the action items that I have for you this morning, we're going to start with A and B. I do see that Dr. Murphy is trying to join us, so Ms. Feldman is going to let her in as well. Good morning, Dr. Murphy. We are just now starting with our action items A and B, and both of these are related to the update that you did hear from Mr. Perry and from Dr. Donnell regarding Senate Bill 49 and its changes that were made to option 6 and option 7. These are in the alternative routes to certification in KRS 161048. This bill contained an emergency, so when it was signed by the governor on March 22nd, it did go into effect. So we need to take immediate action to update our regulations to align with the new statutory provision. Specifically, what this bill did was it extended the renewal period for the temporary provisional certificates that are given to the option 6 and option 7 candidates. The temporary provisional is a 1-year certificate that previously by statute, those candidates could renew up to 2 times. So for a total of 3 years of temporary provisional certification. Senate Bill 49 extended that so that now they can renew those up to 4 times for a total of 5 years of temporary provisional certification. One thing to keep in mind, and it is noted in both of your staff notes, is that federal regulation around IDEA does limit the term for which a teacher of exceptional children can be on alternative certification. In those cases, those individuals can only serve on alternative certification for 3 years and comply with the federal regulation. And so jumping into each individual item, we'll start with action item A, which is 16 KAR 9080, and that is the option 6 regulation. And again, option 6 is our university-based program where the individual is going to be enrolled in a program with the institution and then also employed by the district. So what we've done here in these regulations, and this one is found starting on page 76 of your agenda book, we have updated the language in there to accommodate this renewal unless the individual is serving as a teacher of exceptional children, in which case they are still going to be limited to that 3-year renewal period so that we can comply with IDEA laws. The language in there is bolded for you to show you specifically the changes that have been made. But this amendment also removes the reference to an outdated application form and then it changes the language around the renewal so that the educator preparation provider can recommend the candidate for renewal based on continued enrollment, completion of annual observation hours, and progress towards the completion of the option 6 program. Previously, I believe the regulation said that it required 6 hours of completion towards the program. However, if this is now potentially on a 5-year cycle, that may change among the periods, so that is being left with that language for the EPP to make that recommendation based on those factors. Because this bill contained an emergency clause, we are asking that you approve both an emergency and an ordinary administrative regulation. The ordinary will still go through that regular process that takes a very, very long time. The emergency will be in effect once it is filed. Because with the emergencies, the statement of emergency, as you'll see in your materials, that does have to be signed by the governor. So we will be circulating this to his office as well after we receive Chair Mitchell's signature on that. And then we are hopeful to be able to file that this week to get that in effect so that we are ready to process those extended renewals June 30th once people are ready to start renewing their certificates. Are there any questions about the process or the regulation?
I just have one clerical issue on page 15, which would be page 90 of the book, under line 18. I feel like there's a word missing there. I think it should say shall meet. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you probably already caught that, but as I was reading it on page 15 of the emergency draft legislation, line 18.
Yes, okay. Shall meet all certification requirements. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, so this time I will need a motion. Is there a motion on the floor?
Sign off for motion for approval of action item A.
All right, and is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Mayfield, I saw you over there. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 9080 University-Based Alternative Certification Program and Emergency Amendment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have action item B.
Action item B is along the same lines that this is the option 7 regulation. Again, this is going to start on page 95 of your agenda book. Follows that same format where we will be doing an emergency and an ordinary. With the option 7, again, we're extending the renewal so that they have the ability to renew up to 4 times, unless they are teaching exceptional children, in which case they will be limited to 3 years total. Are there any questions about action item B?
All right, at this time, I'll need a motion.
So move on. I'll offer a motion for action item B to be approved.
Thank you.
Second.
And it was a second.
Second.
Thank you. And our motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 91 Alternative Route to Certification Institute Emergency Amendment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have action item C presented by Todd Davis.
Morning, everyone. Action item C, is in regards to a waiver request. We'll get into that. For the last preschool year, you get the approved waiver of 16 KAR 2:120, section 2, subsection 3B through C, to allow second issuance of emergency certification. As previously mentioned by Dr. Darnell, school and district leaders have overwhelmingly supported this additional flexibility and continue to state that is extremely beneficial and are requesting that flexibility to continue for the next school year. Also previously mentioned in Senate Bill 49, there's specific language that allows emergency certificate holders of this school year to be reissued a certificate for the 23-24 school year. This waiver would allow anyone who has previously been issued an emergency teaching certificate the ability to be issued another emergency teaching certificate as they meet character and fitness requirements outlined in KRS 161120, section 1. This action is intended to assist school districts in filling those positions that we are faced with those challenges of the teacher shortage for finding qualified teachers. Therefore, OELE is requesting EPSB approve the waiver of 16 KR 2:120, section 2, subsection 2 or 3, B through C, to allow reissuance of emergency certification for the 23. Any questions?
I have a question. So going back to the spring of 2020, when we started waiving these things, is it possible that a teacher could have emergency cert, and then at some point get tenure with an emergency cert? And this feels like it might be the 5th year going forward with that.
And my understanding with tenure, and Cassie can correct me if I'm wrong, emergency certification is a certificate, so it does qualify for a tenure.
Thank you.
But a tenured teacher who loses their certificate might lose their tenure. Because they wouldn't certify a teacher, right?
Correct.
Any other questions?
If I'm an emergency certified teacher and I'm on my 3rd year, do I have to go through the same process of review by my administration team as a teacher that has taught for 3 years regularly?
What's the evaluation process?
Yeah, but the person doesn't go with that. How does it?
Yeah, all policies remain in effect. So each year, it's due to it being a 1-year certificate. Postings still have to be posted and kept, and a search, and then all the documentation appropriately signed by the superintendent.
But I'm a current city, I'm sure that's, I mean, all of my emergency certified teachers, they go through the same process.
And that was when I was going to point out with different project as well, is that the emergency certificate is still, even with the waivers, even with the language that is contained in Senate Bill 49, it's still only available if there is not a qualified candidate.
Right.
The districts are still having to post and say that we have this position available, and they're having to verify that there is not a qualified candidate to request that. So they do still have to go through that process and submit that documentation to us.
Any other questions?
Trying to make sense of it as far as it's a really good question about the tenure question, because then if you get into the 5th year first day, I didn't have that. I don't know.
But it's still an emergency.
It is,
If you don't qualify for it the next time,
right,
you lose your tenure
in that district.
in that district. Yeah.
Right.
And the district would also be the one making the request. So they would be the one determining that they are keeping this emergency certified educator, that they are the ones asking for that certificate. And because your emergency certificates are all specific to the district in which they are serving. So, for example, if I was being certified in Franklin County, they were requesting an emergency certificate for me. My certificate would say limited to the Franklin County schools.
Any other questions? At this time, I will need a motion.
I make the motion to approve the waiver for reissuance of emergency certification.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Is there a second?
Just a question.
I think we have to start and we can do questions and discussions after the second.
Okay.
Is there a second?
So I'll second, so I can ask my question.
The motion before the board is to approve the reissuance of emergency certification for the 2023-2024 school year. Is there any discussion?
Actually, you know what? I don't have a question. I'm good.
All right.
It's only for this year. It's just for this school year.
Yes.
Okay, I'm good. My second stands.
Is there any other discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion passes. Thank you very much. The board is now ready to review waiver request KRS 1610281N. Provides that the board has the authority to waive its administrative regulations when a request is submitted by an applicant for certification, a post-secondary institution, or a superintendent of a local school district. When requesting a waiver, the requesting party must submit to the board a written request along with appropriate justification for the waiver. EPSB staff reviewed the waivers with the EPSB waiver committee during an open meeting immediately prior to this meeting, and the waiver committee formulated recommendations. Brandon Herod and Crystal Horde will present the waiver request to the full board, and waiver committee chair Kathy Gunn will present the committee's recommendation for final action. Starting with waiver A, presented by Brandon Herod.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, board. We'll start with waiver A. It's a waiver of a portion, I apologize, of section 16K or 5040. It was submitted by Georgetown College to waive a portion of the 70 required student teaching days. Due to some of the weather that's come through this spring, there was closures in the districts where they had student teachers placed due to weather damage, flooding, and power outages. Due to this, they feel that they've submitted a list of 9 students that with supplemental work and trying to rearrange their schedules may still fall 3 days short of the required 70 days. So they would reach their 67 total days, but they want to request those 3 additional days if they are not able to make those up.
Right, thank you. And Chair Gunn, what was the recommendation?
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request and supporting documentation submitted by Georgetown College, and the committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the waiver committee recommends that EPSB grant this waiver.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. At this time, I will need a motion.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 5040 request to waive student teacher days just due to district school closures for Georgetown College. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next up is waiver B.
Waiver B is to waive a portion of KR 5040 for the 70 full days of teaching for Rihanna Strickland. It was submitted by Northern Kentucky University. Ms. Strickland suffered a tragic and personal event. Those details are in your agenda books, just to protect the privacy. I will not go into those details. If anyone has any questions, we were happy to answer those. But she notified NKU immediately of the incident. In discussion with them, they agreed that she would be granted a little time with her family due to the incident. So she then came back and has returned to her placement in Kenton County. She will complete 60 of the 70 days. She's had several support letters from her cooperating teacher that said, or supervisor, that said that she, her relationship with the kids is the best that she's seen from a student teacher. She has completed 2 lesson plans. She's been observed. She's done her philosophy of education. She's done some teacher work samples. And the university was very pleased with a lot of her work. So they feel like the 10 days is, they want to request the waive those 10 days.
If you're looking for the specific reason, it's on page 112, item 2. Sorry. The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by North Kentucky University. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. This time I'll need a motion.
I make a motion to.
You, Captain Brzezinski. Second, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 5040, request to waive student teacher days for Rihanna Strickland due to personal emergency. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Then the motion passes. Moving to waiver C.
Waiver C was submitted by Lindsey Wilson College on behalf of Chelsea Blair. It is a request for an alternative student teaching placement. Ms. Blair has been diagnosed and submitted a doctor note of a medical condition that has left her with some complications. Those complications and symptoms were severe enough where she couldn't do in-person student teaching. She has been doing virtual observations and creating video lessons and working virtually with her teacher. When she notified Lindsey Wilson of this, they got together, formed a plan. They had several meetings where they laid out how they would supplement her observations virtually, how they would provide a calendar for her to stay on track. They would provide alternative experiences and assignments that would help her as well while doing these virtual lessons. There's a lot of letters of support. She has maintained a 3.58 GPA. She's completed her praxis assignment and has received high marks on her portfolio while doing her student teaching. So they wanted to request you approve this alternative student teaching placement for Chelsea.
Thank you.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request and supporting documentation, and the committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant this waiver.
Thank you. At this time, do I have a motion? Now, is there a second?
I got it.
Taylor, thank you. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 5040, alternative student teaching placement request for Chelsea Blair. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, waiver D.
Waiver D is the waiver of section 16 KAR 5040 for an alternative student teaching placement for Donald Walter III. This was submitted by the University of Cumberland's. Mr. Walter III is pursuing a certificate as a health teacher. They have reached out to 9 districts to try to find his second placement. He's done a placement in the high school setting, trying to find the placement in the elementary setting. It's just they aren't able to find one. So they're requesting that he do his second placement in the middle school setting.
Thank you. And Ms. Gudge?
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request and supporting documentation, and the committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that we grant the waiver.
Thank you. This time, is there a motion?
Motion to accept the waiver. Second.
Well, thank you, Captain Brzezinski. Second, the motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 5040, alternative student teaching placement request for Donald Walter Mayer III. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you so much. And waiver E presented by Ms. Horry.
Waiver E is requested by Mr. Matthew Courtney. It is a waiver of 3090, the Advanced Educational Leaders Program. Now, while Mr. Courtney is intends on pursuing the superintendent certification program through UK, and the board doesn't, there's not a waiver required for admission to a superintendent program. The requirement in 3090 requires that they must have 2 years of district-based administrator experience or other EPSB approved experience. And University of Kentucky is just wanting to ensure with Mr. Courtney that upon completion of the program, that his experience will meet the requirement of the regulation. Mr. Courtney's experience, he is in his 6th year of experience with KDE. He has worked as education administrative program consultant, executive staff advisor, and policy advisor. And the documents that were submitted with the board agenda book, he aligned his duties within the department to the duties of a district-based administrator. So again, the waiver is requesting the board to recognize his 6 years of his 6 years of experience at KDE to meet the requirements of administrator. So he would be able to receive the superintendent certification upon completion of the program.
The waiver committee reviewed the request and supporting documentation submitted by the applicant. The committee recommends that EPSB approve the applicant's experience.
Thank you. At this time, I need a motion. Snell, is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Reaver. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 3090, a request to allow other administrative experience issuance of superintendent certification upon completion of the preparation program for Matthew Courtney. Is there any discussion?
I think that the committee this morning had some good discussion that I thought might be relevant for the whole board to hear about the lack of experience as a principal, and specifically was brought up not having people report directly to you. So I don't know if the others want to speak on what was said there. I know Ms. Murphy abstained during that meeting. So that's some other discussion.
Yeah, we went back and forth just because we were trying to see how many people did directly report to him in his current role and what his current responsibilities were. And so we just looked at the chart that he created and some of the other documents that he presented. And to be honest, we were very much back and forth, but then we thought about what UK will provide for the training and the field hour experience he would require. And we felt that with the language of the statute, it allowed for outside of just traditional administrative experience. So we recommended that we grant.
Because like you said, it doesn't take this approval to be admitted into the program. Only that once the program is completed, that he would be able to request certification.
But this waiver now will grant him that too, whenever he gets.
I had to find it when I was reviewing this paperwork last week. Has this applicant or this person that this waiver is about ever been in an administrative role in a school?
No, prior to, well, I know you read the resume here in the back.
See it, but I might have overlooked it.
I don't know what page it was on. Do you have it?
Just 147.
Okay, thank you. His experience, he's been with the Department of Education since 2017. Prior to that, at Midway University as Executive Director of Missions and Partnerships. 2013 to 2017, founder and Executive Director at Bluegrass Center for Teacher Quality. And then 2010 to 2014 as a music educator at Midway.
When we looked at this, we had the statutory language in front of us, and we were able to see what all the exemptions and the other things besides the school principal were. I'm not able to find that currently, but I remember looking at that the last time we had one similar to this.
I do have that language. So this is 15K or 3090, which again, what we're talking about here is specific to the school superintendent and for issuance of the certificate. And it requires that they have at least 2 years of experience in a position of school principal, supervisor of instruction, school counselor, director of people personnel, director of special education, school business administrator, local district coordinator of vocational education, or a coordinator, administrator, or supervisor of district-wide services. Other administrative experience may be substituted for this requirement with the approval of the EPSB. What Jen was referring to from the last, I believe it was the last meeting, there was a waiver request that the board reviewed that was also from 309 that was for the superintendent certification, and an individual who had experience from the Kentucky Department of Education and asked that you accept that experience for issuance of the certificate. And what that individual did was they were able to show that their experience within the Office of Special Education was equivalent to a director of special education. So based on that, this individual has taken his experience and duties and put those into a chart for you that is aligning that to different administrator programs that, or administrative experience, sorry, that would be allowed for issue. Ultimately, that is the board's decision here. And I do see that Dr. Murphy has been trying to communicate with us. We have not been able to hear her. But she has provided in the chat that she abstained because she finds it an interesting precedent to approve the waiving of a requirement prior to admission to the program, as opposed to at the end of the program itself. This negates the expectation that the person used the 2 years while in the program to serve in a qualifying role. That does distinguish this from the waiver that you saw last time, because that individual had already completed the program. This applicant here has provided you with a letter, I believe, from the institution. The institution itself has indicated that they will not admit him without that understanding that he would be eligible for certification upon completion of the program. But it is different than the typical waiver that this board.
Any other discussion?
Is there a way to give them some assurance otherwise? I mean, because we probably do want to know how the program goes for this person, right?
Well, it's still, your approval today would still require them to successfully complete the program. They still have to meet the certification requirements to be able to be issued that. So that's going to require successful completion of the program. However, they would not have to come back to you and ask for you to approve this experience. What you would be doing today is saying that you approve the experience for issuance of the superintendent certification upon completion of the program. And so there is not a process by which to do that unofficially.
So they won't let him in the program unless we say, move right the handle there.
Yeah, that's what we fought with.
I just be honest, I struggle with a person who could be leading an entire district and have never been in an administrative role in a school. All of the things that come before them. I know that the programs will prepare them for that, but if we waive that requirement now, then there are, as long as they're successful in that program, which is rigorous, we're putting them at the head of a school district. Signing off on the certificate.
Well, we're making them eligible. The school district will still have to hire them. So it'll still be up to the board or whoever that hiring body is for that district to decide whether or not they felt he's qualified.
Any other discussion? So I just want to recap what the motion is, and if you want to oppose it, you're welcome to do that. We already have a motion on the floor and a second, so we do need to follow through with it. But the motion before the board right now is to approve 16 KAR 3090 request to allow other administrative experience for issuance of superintendent certification upon the completion of a preparation program for Matthew Working. So all those in favor of approving, say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion fails. And we can move on. All right. Now waiver F.
Okay, thank you. Waiver F is requested by Mr. Alan Hollenbeck. He is a certified educator, certified administrator from the state of Colorado. He is wanting to apply for principal certification in Kentucky. All of his experience in Colorado has been in a charter school. He's been a principal in the charter school system for 20 years as a certified administrator. For 3 years prior to completing his administration program, he served as a teacher in the charter school system without certification. And in his documents that he provided to support this waiver, he provided documentation from Colorado statute that showed he qualified for an exemption to obtain teacher certification. So essentially, he is requesting a waiver of 3090 to transfer his Colorado administrator certificate to Kentucky. But the fact that he does not qualify for a teaching certification in Kentucky, which is one of the requirements in 3090. So he's asking for a waiver of the requirement to qualify for a teaching certification in Kentucky so that he can transfer his administrator certification to Kentucky.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the request and supporting documentation submitted by the applicant, and the committee recommends the EPSB approve the applicant's experience as an administrator.
Okay. At this time, I will need a motion.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 3090 request to allow non-certified teaching experience in a charter school to meet the requirement of 3 years teaching experience for issuance of principal certification for Alan Hollenbeck. Is there any discussion? Hearing none.
Be the break one here, but I just think it needs to be. And charter school is not public. That's just my opinion.
Any other discussion?
If and when the teacher mobility compact comes into play, right? If this person has a certification in another state and then transfers, it does not matter what there's like, once we accept, right? I mean, that's the way that's gonna work.
Yes, so but here in speaking about a administrator certification, so right now the teacher licensure compact is specific to teachers. Now that may evolve because what the member states will each do is they will have a list of eligible licenses, and then the receiving state would also have a list of eligible licenses. And so if we are both member states and they have an eligible license, we would have to accept that eligible license, even if their requirements around obtaining that are slightly different. Here, this individual, what we're talking about issuing is the principal certificate. He's not receiving a Kentucky teaching certificate. It would just be the principal. They did have, in addition to the teaching experience at the charter school, he has the principal experience at a public school.
No, his principal experience it's all been in the charter school system. but it has been a state-approved charter. He's been fully certified as a principal for that entire time. So he could have used that to be a principal in a public school, but he stayed in the charter system.
That was the question that I asked during discussion. Was he certified as an administrator? He just was never certified as a teacher because it wasn't required when he was teaching.
Thank you. And the members, again, when we are voting, if you want to approve, you would say yes if you wish to dissent. If you do not want to approve a waiver, then you are able to say nay and have your vote on the record as well.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have.
Just to make sure we have that recorded, the nays were Mr. Edwards and Ms. Berry.
Thank you. Next, we have waiver G.
Waiver G is requested by Ms. Miranda Judd. Ms. Judd completed a Director of Special Education program through University of the Cumberland in June 2018. She is requesting a waiver of the administrator assessment requirement in 16 KAR 3090. The requirement that directors of special ed and all administrative certification programs to complete the school leader licensure assessment, that requirement went into effect December 1st, 2020. Again, her program was completed in June of 2018. She did not realize at the time that she was only applying for rank change, which we issued. Recently, I believe she was going to apply for a director of special ed position and realized she did not have the DOSE certification on her credential. She inquired with us. We told her at the time of application for DOSE, which is now, we now require the school leader licensure assessment. So she's asking the board for a waiver of that requirement since she completed her program prior to December 1st, 2020, when that became a requirement.
Waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by the applicant, and the committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the waiver committee recommends that everyone please check your certification every year and grant a waiver.
This time, I will need a motion.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. The motion before the board is, sorry, I got off track there, is to approve 16 KAR 3090 request to waive the school leader's licensure agreement for Miranda Judd. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Next is waiver H.
Waiver H is requested by Ms. Tina Chambers. She is currently employed with Paris Independent Schools. Ms. Chambers is requesting a waiver of 16 KAR 4080, which is the out-of-state prepared educator, the recency requirement, the recency requirement in regulation that requires an educator coming from out of state must either have prepared for their teacher preparation program in the last 5 years or have 6 semester hours of recent graduate credit. Ms. Chambers, again, she's on a 1-year recency certificate for the current school year 22-23 with the requirement that she complete the 6 hours of graduate coursework during the course of this school year. She completed an alternative teacher certification program in Florida during, she started 2004. She taught on an alternative teacher certification program or alternative teacher license from 2004 to 2007. Beginning in 2007, she was fully certified as a professional educator in Florida and taught through the 17-18 school year. We do have a gap of time from 2018 until she became certified in Kentucky, but she is requesting a waiver of the 6 semester hour recency requirement.
The committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by the applicant, and the committee did not find exceptional circumstances to justify the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB deny this waiver.
This time I will need a motion.
I make a motion.
Mr. Edwards, and second by Captain Rosinski. The motion before the board is to deny 16 KAR 4080 request to waive out-of-state recency requirements for Tina Chambers. Is there any discussion?
Yes. One of the things, if you look at page 168, it says that as of March 9th, 2023, she's currently taking 6 hours of graduate classes towards her master's in teaching. So won't those 6 hours satisfy the 6 hours she needs? I didn't understand the reason for the waiver.
Her principal reached out about her requesting the waiver to me, and I said, yes, that's an option. Now, I believe she had already enrolled in the courses, or probably, that's probably it. I reached out again to her before submitting this documentation to Cassie for the agenda to see if her principal wanted to provide a letter of support. I didn't get a response back on that. So my guess is she was probably going to go ahead and pursue the coursework just in case. Didn't have a whole lot of communication on that coming back to me.
The other discussion that the waiver committee had was if she were a Kentucky resident that had not taught since 2018, she'd be required to do the 6 hours. So transferring from another state should not give you a better opportunity than someone who lived here. So that's why we asked to deny.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Currently teaching in this school district with a certificate that's
A 1-year professional certificate, yes.
Any other discussion? Just a reminder that the motion before the board is to deny 16 KAR 4080 request to waive out-of-state recency requirement for Tina Chambers. So voting aye would be to deny that. Just clarifying that with you all. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have waiver I.
Waiver I is requested by Mr. Scott Gural. He is requesting a waiver of 16 KAR 6010, which is, go back to, sorry, they're out of order. I apologize. Okay, let's try that again. This waiver is requested by Ms. Jennifer Bergen. She's requesting a waiver of 6010, which is the assessment regulation. Ms. Bergen is hired to teach, or she's certified to teach middle school science and social studies. Currently employed with Harrison County Schools. They lost a biology teacher this year. She's been covering 9th grade biology with her 5 through 9 science certification. She did take the biology content test back in 2006 and passed it, but never pursued adding the biology certification at that time. I did check to see if the test that she took in 2006 is the same test that we require now, and it is. It was the same test number. It was just the paper version, and now ETS offers the electronic version. So her score is expired, but it is the same test that we do require now.
Thank you. Ms. Gunn?
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by the applicant, and the committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends the EPSB grant this waiver.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 6010 request to waive the 5-year test recency requirement for Jennifer Bergen. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next is waiver J.
Now, for this one is for Mr. Scott Gural. This is also a waiver request of 6010 for the 5-year test recency. He is a certified English teacher who is wanting to add secondary mathematics through the highly qualified application process. He took and passed the content test for secondary math in 2017, but he only recently inquired about the highly qualified route. That test score is now expired. I did confirm that the test has not changed for secondary mathematics. And he was asking the board to allow that test to be counted now.
The waiver committee reviewed the request and they found exceptional circumstances. Therefore, the committee recommends EPSB grant this waiver.
Thank you so
And
much.
I have the.
Thank you. At this time, I will need a motion. Thank you, Ms. Snell. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 6010 request to waive 5-year test recency requirement for Scott Grawl. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Waiver K.
K is requested by Mr. Nathaniel Hamer. This is also a waiver of 16 KAR 6010, the assessment recency, or for assessment recency. Mr. Hamer completed his teacher preparation program for PE, physical education, at University of Cumberland in 2016. At the time he graduated, he had taken and passed all practice assessments. However, he moved to the United Kingdom for 6 years and did not apply for his Kentucky certification. He's returned to the U.S. now, and we're looking to return to the U.S. and apply for positions, and discovered that his scores were expired. So he is requesting the board to waive the 5-year recency requirement.
Scott?
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request and found exceptional circumstances. Therefore, the committee recommends that the waiver committee, that the EPSB, grant the waiver.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Captain Rosinski. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 6010 request to waive 5-year test recency requirement for Nathaniel Hammer. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next, we have waiver L.
And just kind of a heads up, the next 3 are going to be very similar. They're all regarding the -1 SEM that the board adopted in December. This waiver L is requested by Mallory Tweedy. Ms. Tweedy completed her preparation program for middle school English and social studies in 2017. At the time she graduated, she had completed all of the testing requirements, but had not passed the middle school social studies and English content assessment. However, with the EPSB's adoption of the -1 SEM scoring policy in December of 2022, those scores that she took in 2017 are now considered passing. So she is asking the board to allow the scores that are older than 5 years.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by the applicant, and the committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the waiver.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. The motion before the board is to approve 16 AAR 6010 request to waive the 5-year test recency requirement for Mallory Tweedy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next is waiver M.
Waiver M is requested by Miss Ashley Walters. Ms. Walters is also requesting a waiver of the 6010 assessment recency. She completed her elementary education program in 2017. She had taken all of the required assessments, but had not passed the elementary social studies subtest. With EPSB's adoption of the -1 SEM, the score from 2018 on that particular test now meets the passing requirements, but the other tests have now expired. So she is requesting a waiver of the 5-year assessment recency.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by Ashley Walters. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Yeah, Brzezinski, is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Dingo. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 6010, request to waive 5-year test recency requirement for Ashley Walters. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. And last, we have waiver in.
Waiver in is requested by Ms. Courtney Wright. This again is a waiver of 6010, 5-year test recency. Ms. Wright completed a dual cert program for elementary and LBD special ed in 2016. At the time of program completion, she had taken all of the tests, but not passed all of the tests. With the board's adoption of the -1 SEM in December, her scores all now meet passing requirements, but they're older than 5 years. She's requesting a waiver.
Good.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by the applicant. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve 16 KAR 6010, request to waive 5-year test recency requirements for Courtney Wright. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. We have one alternative route certification application at this time. The applicant is pursuing the option 1 exceptional work experience route certification. This is one of the alternative routes established by the legislature in KRS 161048. An applicant with exceptional work experience must have an offer of employment from a local school district, a bachelor's or graduate degree meeting minimum GPA requirements, and an academic major or a passing score on the academic content assessment in the area in which the certification is being sought. The board will need to determine if the applicant's work experience constitutes exceptional work experience. The application is presented by Ms. Horn.
Thank you. So this application is made on behalf of Ms. Claire Bernard by Grant County Public Schools. Grant County Schools is hiring her, wants to hire her as a K-12 biology teacher. Ms. Bernard, she holds a Bachelor of Science in Molecular Biology and Physiology. She actually had 2 master's degrees from what I saw in her documentation, but it's one in biotechnology and one in cellular biology, and she also has a PhD in plant pathology. She has over 20 years experience in microbiology, working for a biotechnology corporation on crop production, crop pathology, and crop protection. She also has worked as a research specialist in sciences. She has, like I said, more than 20 years of experience, very accomplished in her field, and all of her items, all of her documents that were presented met the requirements of the statute.
Thank you. At this time, I'll need a motion.
I make a motion for the application.
Thank you, Mr. Fryer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. The motion before the board is to approve Claire Bernard's alternative route for biology grades 8 through 12. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you so much. I'll now open the floor to any board member for board comments. Does anyone have anything they wish to share?
One thing, I would love for us to consider maybe, and through the direction obviously of Cassie and team, is maybe with the 5-year being extended to 10-year. I feel like we get 4 or 5 of those every meeting. That adds up to about 30 approvals. And so if that is that common, that's could be a barrier for people who don't know to request the waiver. I know that was something that had been discussed before. I know Dr. Murphy has talked about that before. So that'd be the 16K or 6010 of just consideration, and maybe save you all a little time on the waiver committee. But if it's that constant piece of just an expired praxis score, if we can extend that to 10 years as appropriate, it's just a consideration. And that may kind of narrow down on really specific cases of something that's unique, or with the pilot, obviously with the standard error measure, that would be different, but just a consideration.
I think that's great. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other discussion, comments that you'd like to make?
you make a motion to do that now, or we have to wait, bring that up during the next meeting?
I think we probably need to look at what ramifications could happen with that, but I think that that's something that we could.
There are two ways you can do that. The board could make a motion to extend the validity period to 10 years for 16 KAR 6010. Or we can also review that and bring a staff note with that to you for the next board meeting, just going through that and how that would work in practice. Either way is a possibility. The only thing I'm thinking through that you may want to flesh out is just making clear that 10 years applies to your current test. So like if you had a test maybe that was in regulation 10 years ago, but it's not in regulation now, you've decided that there is another test and you want those applicants to meet, you would not want test scores from 10 years ago for a test that's no longer valid.
Is there a KAR that goes along with that we would have to revise as well?
It's 16 KAR 6010. That is the regulation that sets forth all of the practice exams that are required for your content area certification. And then within there, I can't remember which section, but towards the bottom of that, there is a section that says that the validity period of those test scores is 5 years, but we can look at extending that to 10 years. I know that Ms. Altman had some tests that she will be bringing to you in June for the board to review. So as part of that, we could also include this in there. And then that way, that would be ready to go for the next school year. So that would, if you did approve the waiver to extend that validity period, it would be similar to what we've done with the admissions exams, where you extend that period and you do so with immediate action.
People who may have a test score right now that is expired, that can't apply for jobs that are being posted right now. If we don't take that into effect until June, they might miss out on some of those jobs. Is there just trying to think of a workaround between now and June where they could even, get that certification while we explore the KAR, or it doesn't have to wait to come before us?
Yeah, so that at the moment. So
I was just trying to make it happen. If we could make it happen.
The downfall of this chair from time to time. So yes, so you could, if you wanted to, make the motion to extend the validity period for practice assessments in 16 KAR 6010 from 5 years to 10 years, starting immediately through the 23-24 school year. We could, you could make that motion, and if it was seconded and approved, then that would go into effect immediately while we look at that regulation.
I understand what you're saying, Captain Krasinski. I personally think we should wait and bring it in the June, ready to go, looking at the years. But that's my personal opinion. I will do whatever the board wishes, but I think
Dr. Murphy
made
a comment. And it was a motion.
Dr. Murphy would like to make a motion to extend the validity period for practice. And Dr. Murphy, are you?
That works.
Can you unmute and see if we can hear you?
So we can call her on the phone.
Because we can't hear her, if somebody in the room would like to make that motion, just to make sure we have all of our bases covered with that.
I would make a motion to extend the praxis Referencing 16 KAR 6:010 from 5 years to 10 years through June 30, 2024.
I'll second.
We're in discussion now.
I'm sorry. Are we somehow making sure that we include that it's the current practice that's still being in use?
So because what has been here
So make
is
sure that's in
the,
there somewhere.
is the assessments required by 16 KAR 6010. So those assessments that are currently in the regulation, any score on those within a 10-year period will be valid under this action. So it is still requiring those assessments. You have not changed any of the assessment. Or do you have a
Yes, would that include the same version of the test that was the paper version? Like our biology person that was 0235 and now it's 56?
as long as it is the same test, then yes, that is.
There's no way to, because people like to find that technicality. So 3 years ago, this was the test and it's not now, but that's within the 10-year requirement. I want to make sure we alleviate that being a possibility.
So there's scores on that. Would it be valid? But that's not a required assessment for certification. That assessment does not currently lead to a certification in Kentucky. So they would still have to pass an assessment that is in 6010 to be issued the certificate. But as long as they pass that within a 10-year period, they would be able to be issued the certificates.
So Crystal, since you're back up, that's what we're gonna come back up. Obviously, we're putting both of you on the spot, but in lieu of like formal staff notes we would get if we waited for the next meeting, like aside from that question you asked about like the computer paperwork, do you have any like immediate things that you're like?
I was just thinking, and Sharon, what year did the paper version change to electronic version?
There for a while, they had both.
Yeah.
So at one point they had just paper, and then at one point they had
You do either or.
electronic or paper. And then straight electronic. It's been
5 years?
probably.
And that may vary from test to test, but what we will be looking at the certification level, and for the record, is that test number that is in 6010 currently,
Right.
that they have a passing score on that within the last 10 years.
And we have the test history document, so if somebody falls within this guideline, we can go back and see, because if we go ahead and this is approved today, it's going to carry back into when there was just paper-based tests. And there have been some tests that have changed within the past 10 years, but we can use that test history document to see if the test they took within the past 10 years was the same version of just a different format of what we require now.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. Y'all can hear me now? Happy day. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these applications will still have to go through institutions, and then the institution is going to be making the recommendation for the certification itself. So it's not as if all of a sudden this is opening the floodgates of thousands of people. It's not, but it is, I think, to Dr. Ellis's point earlier, it is holding back people who aren't advocating for themselves, right? Any barrier that we can reduce that doesn't make sense, we have the obligation to do it. So I do think that there's an opportunity here.
You make a good point that, most of these individuals that are coming before you will be coming through your institutions, depending on the time it's been since they've completed their program too, and you may have some coming from other states. So that there are the possibility that you have some coming outside of that process, but again, we're likely not looking at a huge number. And I know we have a lot of our institutions in here right now, and Mr. Davis will be accompanying them for a meeting afterwards to discuss this further.
I want to move on now for the summer reason and just for equity, as far as, people don't know about the waiver process, they are going to get left behind, whereas now they wouldn't.
So we're still in discussion mode, and I just want to say, I know where I'm going. I'm all for this. I just want to also bring it back at the June meeting for staff to have some time to look at it, just to see if there's anything that we need to shore up to make sure that there's no cracks or no loopholes or nothing, so that we can just say, hey, we looked at it and we're still good with it at the June meeting, or if we need to make any amendments or changes to that there. So I'm just going to ask if we could do that in the discussion portion of this that hasn't passed yet.
I can amend my amendment for it to just be through the.
I'll just leave it. Yeah.
So what I hear from you, and just to make sure that staff, what we will do with this after we adjourn today, is we will go ahead and get the guidance ready for this so that we can push this out to everybody to let them know that, yes, here's the action that you all have taken. This is what we're going to allow. We will also send a copy of it back to the board so that you can see it. And then we will bring you something in June as well that just shows you, based on the action that you took in April, here is what that is. And then if anything comes up between April and June that we need to add in with that motion, we can add that so that you can address it in June. Otherwise, we'll just provide you with that information and then show you the proposed changes to the regulation to start that process of making it more permanent, if that's what you were looking for.
Is there the budgetary impact of this motion currently?
I don't believe that we would have much, if anything, would be pretty negligible. You may have additional applicants that are going to come in and qualify for certification because of this, so that, potential for an increased workload. However, with increased applications does mean we receive certification fees for that to offset those costs.
Any other discussions? All right. If you don't mind, Captain Rosinski, I'm going to have you read this motion just one more time to make sure, since I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, so I make a motion that we extend the current praxis test scores as required for certification, 16 KAR 6:010, from 5 years to 10 years through June 30th, 2024.
All right. And we already have a second on it. Any other discussions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All right. And the motion passes. Great. We're just going to bring back up, because we're in board comments. If there's any other board comments or motion you want to slide in there.
I don't want to slide necessarily a motion, but I did want to tag on to something. I think, Cassie, you indicated earlier that in June there would be a review by Ms. Salzman of the praxis tests. And I'm hearing from my folks that the counseling praxis test is causing an issue of some variety because ETS has changed and they are no longer offering the old test. And so we want to make sure that the only available test for students to take is actually recognized for the licensure.
We do not actually require a school counselor test. Now, I know some EPP require it for their certification or whatever, but that's the EPP decision. EPSB, we do not have a school counseling test. And
Okay,
so
I'll double check. I'll double check with what's going on and send you all an email.
the agenda for June, that's not going to be one of the tests. Now, no, ETS has adopted a new school counselor test, but currently Kentucky does not have a school counselor test, so that is not going to be on the June agenda.
That, Dr. Mary, maybe that will offset some of the concerns about that, is that at this time, we're not bringing a new test forward for the EPSB to accept for school counselors because there is not one that is currently required. However, EPPs within their programs still have that ability.
Let me amend my comment to the school psychology praxis exam. Does that make it better?
Apology on the June one either.
But I would note too, Chair, if that's okay, that if anyone does have concerns, especially from our EPPs, if you have concerns about programs or exams and things that you are hearing, developments from ETS, Sharon Salzman is the point of contact with staff for that. If you would like to reach out to her with any concerns or any questions about those exams as well.
Any other board comments? All right, at this time, I believe we are ready to go into closed session pursuant to KRS 61810(1)(c) and J to conduct a character and fitness review and to review potential actions relating to complaints and reports. At this time, I will need a motion to go into closed session.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. Do I have a second? Ms. Snell, the motion before the board is a motion to go into a closed session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And it passes. We're now ready to move to closed session. All right, at this time, I will need a motion to go back into open session.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Ellen, and the second from Ms. Mayfield. All those, the motion before the board is to go back into open session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed say nay, and the motion passes. We are now back in open session. At this time, we will vote on those items discussed during closed session. For character and fitness, 1 through 7, approve. 8, defer. 9 through 13, approve. 14, deny. 15, 16, and 17, approve. 18, deny. On CA4 online character and fitness, 1, defer. 2, approve. 3, deny. 4, 5, and 6, approve. 7 and 8, deny. 9 through 16, approve. 17, deny. 18, approve. 19, defer. 20 through 23, approve. For agreed orders, 1 through 17, accept. Number 18, reject. 19 through 22, accept. 23, reject. And 24, accept. For motions to reconsider, number 1, approve the motion to reconsider and approve the modified agreed orders. For number 2, under motion to reconsider, defer for more information. For educator cases, 1, attorney review. Number 2, admonish. 3, dismiss without prejudice. 4 through 8, attorney review. 9, dismiss with prejudice. 10, defer. 11, 12, and 13, attorney review. 14 and 15, attorney review. 16, admonish. 17, attorney review. 18, dismiss with prejudice. 19 through 22, attorney review. 23, dismiss with prejudice. 24, attorney review. 25, 26, and 27, dismiss with prejudice. 28, defer for training, educator ethics training. 29, attorney review. 30, defer for training, classroom management training. 31, dismiss without prejudice. 32 and 33, attorney review. 34, dismiss without prejudice. 35 and 36, attorney review. 37, dismiss with prejudice. 38 and 39, attorney review. 40 and 41, dismiss with prejudice. 42, attorney review. 43 through 76, dismiss with prejudice. 77, dismiss without prejudice. 78, dismiss with prejudice. 79, dismiss without prejudice. 80, 81, and 82, dismiss with prejudice. 83 through 87, refer to hearing. 88, no further action. 89, refer to hearing. 90, no further action. 91, dismiss with prejudice. 92 and 93, attorney review. 94, attorney review. 95, dismiss without prejudice. 96 and 97, defer for training, admin code training. 98, dismiss with prejudice. 99, defer for training, admin code training. 100 and 101, dismiss with prejudice. Not 102, defer for training, admin code training. 103, dismiss with prejudice. 104, attorney review. 105, dismiss with prejudice. 106 through 108, attorney review. 109, dismiss with prejudice. 110, defer for training, OEA, recommended training. 111, dismiss with prejudice, and 112, dismiss without prejudice. At this time, we will give our vote, starting with Captain Rosinski.
I have 3 questions. Number 23 on educator cases, was that dismissed with or without?
3, I have dismissed with prejudice.
34, same, with or without?
I had it without prejudice.
Number 83, did that refer to hearing or no further action?
That was referred to hearing
Okay.
for 83.
Okay, yes to all? Yes to all?
Yes, to all.
Yes to all.
Yes to all. Yes to all.
Eli Edwards, recuse myself on motion to reconsider 2A. Yes to all others.
Yes to all.
Yes to all.
Meredith Pittman, motion to reconsider 2A. I need to recuse myself. Yes to all.
Justin Mitchell, recuse on agreed orders number 10. Yes to all of the others. At this time, I'll need a motion to adjourn. Motion.
Second.
Thank you. And the second, Captain Rosinski. The motion before the board is a motion to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And we have passed and we are now adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.